And I've started doing some COVID work for Denver. And then this program in environmental quality in our public health department called and asked me about joining the Love My Air program as a outreach and education coordinator. So I've been doing that for the last couple of years. I've been happy to do it. It's been a great program to be a part of. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Cool. My name's Nancy. I've been in the Love My Year program for about a year now. I am a program specialist is my title, but essentially I do also outreach and education, but in the setting with our healthcare partners primarily. So with the clinics we work with school nurses, whereas Ephraim does the schools and the community organizations. Before I was at the city, I was actually here. I graduated with my MPH a year and a half ago, maybe. So yeah, I was here. I was in the CBH program, and I also worked at the Central Office for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement here at Anschutz. And so I was doing community engagement work in North Aurora. So kind of fun to be back, and good to see all y'all.
Yeah, just a reminder, so we do have a few folks on Zoom, so just make sure.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks.
Yeah, if y'all don't hear us, just speak up. And for that matter, if anybody has any questions while we're talking, just speak up, raise your hand. You can put it in the chat if you want, or you can just like talk. But we're pretty casual, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we start, if you don't mind, we would love to do a land and labor acknowledgement. And I will read this for you guys. Please bear with me. Thank you very much for that. All right. On this behalf of the city, today the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment honors and recognizes the land on which we live and work and is the traditional territory of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Ute peoples, as well as being historically tied to at least 48 contemporary tribal nations. We acknowledge and honor those who have stewarded this land and their resilience throughout generations. We recognize that the government, academic, and cultural institutions were built on and continue to enact exclusions and erasure of indigenous peoples. And as individuals and as a department, we are committed to working to dismantle ongoing systems and legacies of oppression and inequality. Inequality, that's spelled wrong. We value the contributions of indigenous communities in Denver. Our work in public health and environment is directly tied to the natives' histories, and we must consider them together. In the same way, we acknowledge that our country was built with stolen and forced labor, and the generational wealth which was created by the hands and on the backs of enslaved Africans has been kept from them while enriching others. We acknowledge that our country's economy, infrastructure, and resulting generational wealth would not exist without the free labor produced by chattel slavery, a dehumanizing practice whose social, legal, and economic legacies continue to haunt us to this day. Really appreciate you guys bearing with us. And this is a quick agenda of what our presentation will be. We will start with talking about air quality in Denver. Nancy will head that one. I will get into the Love My Air program, and then Nancy will finish us off with the health effects of air quality, how is air quality regulated in Colorado, and then a conclusion slide as well. All right, with that, here is our mission. It is to provide Denver's diverse population and communities with visible, accessible, and actionable air quality information.
Right. Sweet. So before we get too much into our program, we want to give a little background on air quality in Denver. I know some of y'all are probably familiar with this information, some maybe not. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a little background about air pollution generally and what's going on right here, which is usually our focus in local government. So when we think about air pollution, we think about two kinds of pollutants. We have criteria air pollutants that are, we have standards set in the Clean Air Act, and we have hazardous air pollutants. So for the criteria air pollutants, the Clean Air Act sets National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, and essentially everybody needs to comply with these NAAQS or you're out of attainment. The two big players here with criteria pollutants in Denver are particulate matter and ozone. Particulate matter, you can see up on this slide, is just essentially really small pieces of pollution, liquids and gas suspended in the air. It's not something that we think of like as a specific species of pollution. It's all dependent on the size. So these guys are really small. You breathe it in, it can get deep into your lungs. It can get even into your bloodstream, cause a lot of health problems. In Denver, we get a lot of particulate matter from the pollution that we produce in the area. We also get it from smoke coming in from the outside. So that's particulate matter, PM 2.5. The other big guy here is ozone. And so ozone is not a pollutant that is emitted. It comes from precursor pollutants, which are nitrogen, oxides, and volatile organic compounds. These react with sunlight to form ozone. That's why we always get a lot of ozone alerts in the summer when it's hot outside. And Denver is actually out of attainment for ozone in a pretty major way, I would say. There's been 2 standards for ozone. Sometimes the EPA will lower the standard when more evidence comes out about the health effects of that pollutant. And so Denver's out of attainment with that standard for the last 2 rounds of ozone. And so that's another major problem here. The other type of pollutants that we think about are air toxics or hazardous air pollutants. These do not have national standards, but they're things that impact our health, like benzene, like toluene, all of these other many things that are not part of these 6 criteria air pollutants. And these are a pretty big topic in Colorado right now. The state's actually working on setting standards for these pollutants for 5 of them. And so I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's the other kind of pollution we think about. Some sources of pollution in Denver. This slide tells you also a little bit about ozone, where it comes from. But we think about power plants, we think about industrial facilities, oil and gas, both in terms of the drilling that happens north of here, as well as refining. So the Suncor refinery in Commerce City, we talk about a lot. Transportation, like cars and trucks, construction, wildfires, all of this sources of pollution. Now, I want to talk specifically about Denver. Why is air pollution such a big problem here where we live? Does anybody have some ideas? I'm sending this out to the audience. Yeah. Definitely. We get a lot of temperature inversions, especially in the winter that's coming up. So essentially we have the mountains over here. We live kind of in a bowl. And so when it will get really cold, the cold air will trap the pollution. We're polluting, has nowhere to go. So it just kind of forms pollution soup. What else? Okay, so that basically is the high, oh, we got chat. I actually don't know how to see that. That's basically the high point here. We got a growing metro area, a lot of people, a lot of industry. We produce pollution, we get some coming in from other places and the wildfire smoke and the ozone, and it kind of can get stuck sometimes. And with that, it's a year-round problem. I know a lot of people tend to think about the smoke in the summer, the smog in the summer. Now we're getting into the winter, we probably don't have to worry about it as much. But that particulate matter, the PM 2.5, you can see on this. I don't think I can use my cursor. Oh, I can. You can see on this graph on the left, it shows the air quality index for the monitors, the state's monitors in Denver that report to the EPA. And so you can see here for ozone, they tend to be all clustered together in the summer, but for particulate matter, they are bad in the summer, like in 2021 when we had a bunch of wildfires, but a lot of years it's worse in the winter when we get those temperature inversions. So that's a little background on air pollution in Denver. I'm gonna pass it over to Ephraim to talk about our program.
Thanks. Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks, guys, again, for having us here. What is Love My Air? Our program it's a community-based or community-led in a way, city-led, excuse me, community air monitoring program. This program started in 2018 from a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies, part of a mayor's challenge that happened to go across the whole nation. Denver won, and they started this Love My Air program. They targeted certain schools that were free and reduced lunch. So a lot of schools in North Denver, a lot of schools that have, a lot of schools in North Denver, some in West Denver as well. A lot of these schools, we have over 30 monitors at these schools, I should say. And a lot of these monitors they measure PM 2.5 mostly. They're not really fancy. They're low-cost sensors. They cost about $1,500 for each sensor at these schools. We have also put up sensors at different places like the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. That monitor is actually a very high-tech monitor, measures more than PM 2.5. I think it measures like 7 or 8 particular pollutants in the air, including like CO and NO2 and NOx and things like that. What we do with these at these schools is we collaborate with a lot of teachers to use the data in their lessons, particularly like environmental science is the biggest science class that we see a lot of the data used in with our teachers. We also talk to nurses. Nancy leads up a lot more coordination with the nurses, school nurses, or nurses of like local clinics as well. I'll get more into that as we go on. Like I said, we're focused mostly on disproportionately impacted communities, or as you see, it's called DICs, is what we call them. Our dashboards in the schools, as you can see with me at the Swansea Elementary, display the data in real time. So we've also started to work more with community-based organizations. We call them CBOs. A lot of that is, I do a lot of outreach with the CBOs. We started to do more outreach to local clinics in Denver, a couple clinics like Tepeyac Inner City Health and a Kaiser clinic in the eastern part of Denver. We're trying to do a lot of connection with air quality and health. Nancy's leading that initiative up. We're actually trying to set up like interactive kiosks in these clinics. So patients, when they come in and they see the air quality, they can interact with the kiosk and get tips about what they can do about their health. And all these things are done with the staff, with doctors, with the nurses of these clinics. So it's not us saying, hey, this is what you guys need to do. This is something that we have done in collaboration with the staff at these clinics. So it's coming from subject matter experts at these clinics who actually deal with the patients at these clinics. We also are exploring conducting workshops with our community organizations. With these workshops, we're talking about what Love My Air is, air quality, like a little air quality 101, talking about what air quality, kind of what we're getting here in a way, but in a more spread out, more detailed format. We've done this over the summer. We did it with a CBO called Groundwork Denver, with some youth, as from like high school age to like 24 years old. So we're trying to get those that are coming into the workforce as well, those that are starting to go into college, starting to kind of figure out what their careers are going to be after high school. And also trying to make it so the youth can start to learn how to advocate for themselves in these situations and when it comes to health and air quality. We piloted these workshops over the summer. We did two of them with that group. It worked well, and we're now exploring with our schools to do this more. So now we're doing it more in Denver public schools as well. We're starting to look into how this can look with our schools. And that gets us into environmental justice. So a lot of our department, public health and environment, we have started to do a lot of focusing on environmental justice and environmental racism as well. So that leads us to back to our community organizations and our Denver public schools. And so targeting those schools in certain areas, the schools that have free and reduced lunch. We're supporting teachers with our own curriculum. We have curriculum that was developed for us that we share out with our teachers. We have a teacher that works at Prep Academy who has created their own project-based learning module to address air quality and to talk to our students about air quality. We have a teacher at Montbello who just did a symposium using the data that Nancy and I were just there on Friday. They did a really good job of presenting the data that they used to talk about anti-idling, not smoking, using public transportation more, not driving your cars as much. things of that nature that talked about and used the data from the sensors that display the PM 2.5 information. Working with some of these, going back to the CBOs really quick, working with these CBOs, we're working with an organization right now to see about this community change grant from the EPA, so we can help them develop different educational opportunities for the local community in North Denver that they work in as well. We did a tour with the Air Quality Commission, Control Commission, called the AQCC in that neighborhood. It's Swansea in North Denver, one of the most polluted areas in the country, believe it or not. We did that tour with them. It was a great tour. We looked at Suncor. We looked at some other places around the area that are very polluted. And it was it's a big success. You can see that picture at the top corner here. That's all the people that were part of that tour as well. And it was wonderful. I suggest you guys go out there at some point, kind of check that area out. It's pretty impressive what that group is doing up there. It's called the Greenhouse Connection Center. Excuse me for saying that wrong. We also partner with the state. The state is doing some project-based learning modules as well that they have set up. It's a 3-week project-based learning module that they have. We did a professional development day with them. We co-presented to some teachers in Denver Public Schools to talk about that. So we partner with it's not just us. It takes a village, as you probably have heard that saying before. It takes a village to do this, and so we're not alone in this fight. We also bring in other partners as well. This network that we have is not just in Denver; it's in Jefferson County. Adams County has their own Love My Air program. There's a program in Wisconsin that I'll shout out as well that's doing a really good job with a team of like 2 or 3 people, and they're killing it up there right now. So it's not just us. We're trying to do a lot and spread this as far as possible. This is a little more on the technical side of it. I'm not the technical person. Our analyst, Brendan Lawler, his information will be at the end. If anybody's a data nerd or wants to get more information on the technical side of it, you definitely contact him and he'll be happy to talk to you about it. But this is kind of a representation of what our monitoring network looks like. That's not necessarily all of them. This is definitely an older picture, but this is pretty much what our network looks like in Denver. And as you see, we have some, you guys have heard about the inverted L in Denver. So exactly. So as you can see, a lot of these schools, a lot of these monitors are on some of that inverted L as well. So we were very, very intentional about where we targeted some of these schools. And as you can see here, this is kind of makes it easy for me to kind of explain this in a way. But as you can see, follow the arrows and you can see where how our data gets collected and gets displayed as well. We have a phone app as well. So in like the Apple App Store, Google Play, or the Google Store, whatever that Google Store is, the app is on there. It's the Love My Air Network app. There's also a website we have that shows a much better representation of our sensor network, denver.lovemyair.com. And I'm sure we'll share these slides and have some links in them as well. But as you can see here, this is exactly how our data gets displayed. And like I said, if you have any questions, please contact Brendan. He will definitely talk about this a lot better than I can. But here we go with Nancy again.
I'll add before we jump into help, if anybody ever is doing a project and wants to get a hold of some neighborhood level air quality data in Denver, you can always hit us up. I think you can download 30 days worth of data directly from the website. But if you want more than that, shoot Brendan an email or Ephraim or me, and we'll get you hooked up with Brendan. But it's available to use. We got a lot of data and we use it in a lot of different ways, but sharing it with students or sharing it with academics is definitely always a great thing. So now we're going to jump into air pollution and health, given that this is a public health class, it seems appropriate. And before I really get into this, I'll say that in a lot of these air quality spaces, it's not always a big focus, air pollution and health, especially like in the regulatory spaces. You get a lot of people who are focused like on the science or focused on the monitoring or focused on the environment, which is all super important, but sometimes the health piece gets lost. So that's why we kind of want to shout it out here and spend some time talking about it. So before we dive in, I'm sending it back to you guys. Air pollution and health. What are some things that you know about, that you've experienced, that your family's experienced, or maybe your friends or your community? I want to hear from the group first. Sorry? Long-term asthma problems? Mm-hmm.
Can I say something real quick? I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up, because one thing I forgot to mention, asthma in DPS, in our Denver public schools, very underreported. We have a lot of kids that have, their parents are immigrants, so their parents are from other places, and they don't, for whatever reason, they don't report that their children have asthma. So that's, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's a huge deal.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. What are some other ideas? Yeah. Take your time. That's for the best.
Smell, nuisance.
Yeah. That's really big, the odor. And that's actually interesting because a lot of air quality is regulated at the state level, but odor is something that we have in our city ordinance. And so we have a little bit of power to do something about it. And it's a huge problem, especially in that North Denver area, but also other parts of town for sure. And it can get pretty stinky up there. Yeah. Any other ideas? Pneumonia, yeah, air pollution can increase the risk for respiratory infections, especially for elderly people, people who are already more susceptible to respiratory infections can put you at higher risk.
Said they went to China and had a deep cough for a couple of weeks afterwards. Seems like it may have been small particles. And then also mentioned wildfire smoke.
Wildfire smoke, definitely. An interesting thing that I didn't know before I started this job is that sometimes the respiratory impacts that you get, it's not just when you're breathing in that air pollution. It's like in the day after and the 3 days after is when we really see those impacts kick in. So what are the non-respiratory health effects? We spend a lot of time talking about the respiratory health effects because that's kind of the most obvious. It's really, it can be very acute. We breathe it and then we notice impacts. But there's a lot of other things that we don't always talk about. So air pollution raises the risk for all kinds of mortality. For infants, for cardiovascular, things like heart attacks, strokes, exacerbation of heart failure, all of this kind of in that acute setting. So we have maybe a wildfire event, we have a lot of smoke in town, we're seeing all of these effects in the hospital, in the ED, during and after that. Over the long term, it causes a lot of inflammation and systemic stress. It can raise the risk for things like diabetes, the risk of impact from existing heart disease. So if you already have it, it can make it worse. And then if you don't have it, it can make you more likely to get it. That's kind of the key for a lot of this, respiratory and non-respiratory. It can even impact the central nervous system. So we think about neurological development in kids, we think about Alzheimer's, dementia, all of this, every iteration of reports where there's more and more evidence, we see more and more evidence of all of these systemic impacts. Respiratory. We kind of hit on this already. Air pollution causes airway inflammation, reactivity. That essentially is the definition of asthma. And so in the short term, all of these symptoms that we think about like cough, chest pain, lung irritation, susceptibility to respiratory infections. And then over the long term, once again, if you already have asthma, it makes it worse. If you don't have asthma, you're at a higher risk of getting asthma. One thing that's kind of interesting, especially kind of with climate change, but air pollution can actually increase the allergic response. And so if your lungs are already irritated from the air pollution, you're allergic, it can make that reaction worse. Then we think about climate change, we think about longer allergy seasons. So all of this is kind of driving that allergic response, which then comes back to asthma for a lot of people. So we know that we're all impacted by air pollution, but we know that we're not impacted equally. And here I want to talk about these concepts of susceptibility versus vulnerability. I feel like this is something that y'all probably talk about in this program at some point. Who can tell me the difference between susceptibility and vulnerability? There's kind of some hints up here. Definitely. Susceptibility has more to do with our intrinsic aspects. Vulnerability has a lot to do with our environment, with the policies that drive that environment. So when we think about air quality, people who are susceptible to air quality, we think about older adults. You know, all of these health impacts that we talked about with air quality, older adults tend to be at higher risk, or they tend to be more susceptible to those impacts already. So when you add air pollution onto that picture, then older adults are extra susceptible. Pregnant people and fetuses, we know that air pollution impacts kids as they're growing. It also impacts fetuses in the womb. People with chronic diseases, whether that's respiratory, whether that's cardiovascular, increase susceptibility to air pollution. And then shifting focus, vulnerability. We think about where you live, where you work, where you go to school, where you play, all of these public healthy type of ideas when it comes to social determinants of health. So do you live somewhere in a part of town where there's less factories? Do you live in a part of town where there's more? Do you live in the city? Do you live in a rural area? Socioeconomic status. We know this kind of ties in together with my last point, the impacts of structural racism. So we know that policies that happened before determined the health of people today. I don't have to tell you guys that, you guys know that. But when it comes to air quality, when it comes to how are we zoning areas, when it comes to where are people living, it goes back to things like redlining. It goes back to decisions that were made that place certain communities, communities of color, low-income communities, at the front line of that air pollution. So that kind of ties back to what Ephraim was talking about environmental justice, why it's really important for us as government employees, as a government program, that we don't kind of put blinders on to the past and we don't put blinders on to the present. Policy is still happening today. We'll talk about that in a second, but it's really important for us to look at the big picture of what's going on in our communities. Speaking of policy, we're going to jump into how air quality rules get made in Colorado. So our program, we do a lot of outreach, we do a lot of education in a lot of different ways. We get a lot of data, but we also participate in air quality rulemakings that happen mostly at the state level. This is kind of a slide that walks through that process, and I'll talk about it in the context of some rulemakings that are coming up. Earlier, I mentioned that Colorado is working on setting standards for air toxics. So the legislation directed the Air Quality Control Commission to say you need to choose 5 air toxics. Right now we have no standards and there's like 400 different air toxics. So we're going to start with 5. We need to choose what they are, and then we need to set health-based standards for those pollutants. And so let's walk through this with that. Whenever we think of where policy comes from, it's going to come from the state legislature, which is the case with the air toxics, or the EPA. The Clean Air Act gives the power to the EPA to regulate air quality, and the EPA designates that power to the state. So the state is the one actually making the rules that have to get followed in Colorado. And so when something changes, either the EPA has changed something or the state has changed something, in the case of the air toxics, it gets sent to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, to the Air Pollution Control Division. And so the state said to the APCD, is this can be full of acronyms, and I'm going to try and avoid that. But the APCD has to make rules about the priority air toxics in the state. And they're going to draft rules. They go through a lot of stakeholdering. They talk to people like local governments. They talk to academics. They talk to communities to an extent. That's something that is not necessarily their strong suit, but they're working on. And we work with some of those folks who are trying to push that in the state. But they'll come up with a draft rule about what are these 5 priority air toxics. And then that gets sent over to the Air Quality Control Commission. So this is a commission. They're appointed by the governor. It includes people from industry. It's actually pretty heavily weighted on the side of industry right now. It includes people from environmental groups. It includes sometimes health professionals, but not right now. That's kind of that missing health piece in the air quality regulation space. And actually right now it includes our boss's boss's boss. So the director of our division, he just got appointed to the Air Quality Control Commission. And so that's kind of the people who are involved in the decision-making. So we go through a rulemaking process, and essentially the draft of the rule that was prepared by the Public Health Department gets presented to all of these different groups. All of these different groups have the opportunity to be what is called a party to the rule. And so that is people like industry. You would imagine that if we're regulating pollutants, air toxics that come out of these industrial facilities, the industry wants to be at the table when we're deciding which ones to regulate. Environmental groups trying to push the needle in terms of how are we protecting people's health. Local governments like us, we're going to be a party to these upcoming air toxics rulemakings, but also our counterparts like in Adams County and Boulder do a lot of work in these rulemakings. Weld County as well is pretty big. And then also regular people can get involved. Regular people can submit written comments. They can present public comments where you get kind of 2 minutes in front of the commission to state your piece. And so we'll come back to that. But we go through this rulemaking process. All of these parties talk to the commission about why their position is the right position, why the other people's position is the wrong position, how do they want the rule to look like. The commission will deliberate, and then we'll get a new rule. And that the process takes a couple of months. The actual rulemakings take a couple of days, and then we're all left with this new rule. And then I'll go home and assume that the new rule is going to be implemented well and that everything that we hope to achieve will be achieved. And that doesn't always happen, but that is the rulemaking process and how we as local government can be involved in that. Now, how can you get involved? This is important because you might have heard we have an election coming up. And so we can vote, first of all, for the people who are in the state legislature. These air toxics rules came out of the state. And so those representatives that we voted for, the ones who did it. We have a presidential election coming up. The EPA director is coming from the president. And so that's another place. Local governments, we can vote in local elections. And then also we can make public comments and share our stories and share how this impacts us as regular people. That's something that doesn't always get enough attention because we get into these rooms, we have all these lawyers, we have all these technical experts, and the voice of the community is not always there. So that's something that we always think about, how can we bring this into the process? And then since we're talking to here environmental health students or public health students of many ways, we can work in these spaces. The Air Pollution Control Division at the state hires a ton of people. They have been hiring like crazy recently for all of these new rules because they have to do a ton of work in writing the rules and implementing the rules. The Air Quality Control Commission has some staff. Environmental groups have a lot of resources that they put into these rulemakings. And then like us, local governments, kind of fun place to work. So vote, don't forget to vote. Please do that. That's kind of the key point here. And that's kind of a wrap on the policy. Does anybody have any questions? I know it's kind of a complicated process and it's a lot if you've never heard of it before. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up. Ooh. So yeah, that is love my air. One of my favorite things about this job is how many different spaces we get to work in. We're not just talking about the environment. We're not just working in community spaces. We're not just working in health clinics. We're not just working in policy, but we really get to see all of these spaces and how they interact with each other. And we get to build a lot of relationships, and that's kind of the foundation of our program. That's the most important part. If we didn't have relationships, we couldn't do any of this work.
Yeah, I think one big thing that's been great since either both of us have been working in this program is I think breaking down the silos within our own government, like our own department, and other departments that are doing a lot of the same work. So you're talking about like our climate action, sustainability, and resilience office. They're doing a lot of work in environmental justice, right? They've developed this whole environmental justice network now, and they've included other parts of the city as well. So we've been a big partner with them. They've introduced us to a lot of different organizations, a lot of different people as well. So as Nancy said, like that's such a huge thing because in any workspace, if you have different departments, it can be very siloed. And it's hard to kind of get out of those silos because we all have a lot of work to do, obviously, right? We all have a lot of things that we're all focused on. So to break down these silos and work with our sister agencies has been a big deal. And it's opened up a lot of big doors for us to develop these relationships that we have developed. So yeah, that's a great point. And something else that I mentioned earlier, like not just here in Denver with Love My Air, we have partners in different places as well, mostly in the surrounding area, but we're trying to expand and bring in other partners from other parts of the country also. Maybe not to be in Love My Air necessarily, but maybe to find ideas, maybe to innovate more. Because like I said, we don't have all the answers, right? We're a city government, one city program in a city government, and we can use more ideas. We can innovate better. We can do more. We've done a lot more since I've been there, and Nancy's been a big part of that too, with the work she's been doing with our local clinics and others. So
Yeah, sweet. So yeah, relationship building.
huge.
That's kind of, that's the whole point of this. And it takes a lot of work and it doesn't always pay off in the way that some other things do. You know, you have to take time to build trust. For instance, with some of the clinics that we're working with, we're trying to decide how are we going to do outreach together. And we've been meeting with them like every other week for this year to try and decide, okay, what's your capacity? Let us listen to you first. Let us hear what you have to say. Why is this important to you? Why do you want to partner with us? So we can best determine how can we partner with you. So yeah, it takes a lot of time. Not everything's going to pay off, but that's how you can make progress in the long run. In all of these ways, with community groups, with other local agencies, with the state, and these policy spaces, all of it based on relationships.
One more thing I'll say about relationships, and I'll leave it. Gotta wrap it up. And Nancy said it. A word she may have said is listening, right? Like I think one thing we started to realize more is how much more we need to listen to our communities, right? Especially being a government organization where historically government hasn't been good to a community, right? Government has segregated or redlined or whatever, you know, so there's a lot of mistrust in community with government. So it's hard, it's not easy. And like I said, you throw a lot of stuff at the wall, you see what sticks. You have to like really be nuanced and listen in how you approach different organizations, different government agencies, whatever. It's huge. So listening has been a big part of how we've conducted outreach, how we've developed these relationships. Yeah, and just thanks to our community partners for allowing us the opportunities to do that.
Just about sums it up.
Glenn's got a few questions in the chat. So one is, can you address trends over time for some of the pollutants we deal with in Denver? And then also questions about, do you recommend use of PPE, maybe more broadly? What are some of the actions you recommend folks take when air quality is bad? And then, yeah, I guess maybe the last one is, are we having much success with reducing emissions in the Denver area? So maybe that trends over time and then some actions that you recommend.
For sure.
I guess as far as trends go, I would say maybe contact Brendan, that first name up there. He'd be more than happy to discuss with Glenn about the trends over the years with the air quality data.
To speak a little broadly about it, generally things are getting better.
Yes.
You know, if you've been around here for a little bit, or even if you haven't been around here for a little bit, you hear about the brown cloud that we used to have over town. And as we regulate, it gets better. And so this process that we have, as clunky as it has worked to an extent. And not necessarily it works as well for everybody as it does for some groups, but generally the air quality gets better. And that is true for a lot of things. There was a study that came out a couple years ago that we're actually seeing a reversal in that trend for particulate matter. Up until 2016, it's getting better, 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 better. And then we start to get these major wildfires, you know, with climate change, with the way that we've managed forests in this country, and our neighbors to the south, to the north. Yeah, we're starting to see a reversal in that trend for particulate matter, that it's leveling out and it's getting worse. So that's kind of especially important with our program, since we do monitor PM 2.5. We got to do all we can in the things that we control, because the things we can't control are getting worse. I know you had a couple of questions.
What do you recommend, like, you know, people wear masks when it's bad? Actually, Glenn also had a question. I think you had one of the slides up that was showing a workshop. I think I know what you're doing in that workshop, but maybe you can explain to folks.
Okay. I think I know which one he's talking about. The one with the fans. Yeah. So we were lucky enough to be invited into a space to help with creating do it yourself air filters. It's pretty arduous, I'm not gonna lie, but it was something that we were able to kind of like using a couple use a box fan with some HEPA filters. I think they are those filters you put in your house that you put like for your air conditioning and stuff. We put filters on those so that people could have something in their home that helped filter out the air. So that's what that was. Just some do-it-yourself air filters.
There you go.
That one. Okay, yeah, that's what we were doing. So we did it on a couple of occasions with a couple of different community groups. We did this one at the Greenhouse Connection Center, and we did one over the summer with oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Mile High Youth Corps. We did that with them as well. And that workshop was out not just with us in that group, it was also with another group called Moms Clean Air Force, Women from the Mountain, and another department in the city as well.
And then we talk about, when we think about protecting ourselves from air pollution, a lot of it is about knowing what is the air quality. That's the first. You can't know what you need to do if you don't know what the air quality is. So we talk about checking that like you're checking the weather when you go outside, especially if you're a member of those susceptible groups or those vulnerable groups of people. And so we talk about things like, if you have asthma, you know the air quality is going to be bad. Make sure that you have your emergency medication with you. Even we don't give healthcare advice. We're not healthcare professionals, but people can even pre-medicate before they go outside if the air quality is bad. So make sure you have your medication. Talk to your doctor about what specifically works best for you. Check the air quality and know at what levels do you experience symptoms. It's very individual. We know what levels generally tend to affect people, but everybody's body is different. Everybody's situation is different. So know when you need to take action at what level. We talk about moving things indoors when it gets pretty bad. This is kind of a hairy topic because we can't always assume that the air quality indoors is better than the air quality outdoors, especially when it comes to particulate matter. So that if it's bad outside, move your activities indoors. But it doesn't always work as well for everybody. So then we think about things like air quality, safe places, like a local library or a rec center. Kind of the same idea as when the city opens the rec centers for extreme heat. A lot of times those extreme heat events coincide with poor air quality events. So using that for respite. We also, I know I'm forgetting something that I had meant to say, but I'm forgetting it.
Well, just kind of feel it, it's kind of helping out with, I mean, I don't know if it's helping you with
Uh-huh.
what you're gonna say, but, as Nancy mentioned, we're not healthcare professionals, but that's why doing this outreach and doing this work with these local clinics is so important.
Mm.
And, getting the information and the right information, the right, tips and tricks or whatever from staff, from people that have been trained or went to school for these things. That's why it's so important to work with them and not just, not for us as a government agency to assume we know, what the best way to reach out or to address these issues with, patients at these clinics. So it's important to get the right, information, the right help, and the right people.
The other thing, masks. That's what it was.
Yeah, it was
So masks, it has to be a well-fitting mask. It has to be an N95, KN95, the same deal as COVID, but kind of a step higher. If you wear the surgical mask, if you wear a cloth mask, that's not going to do much for air quality. And so when it is, when we have these extreme events, then that can be a good choice, especially if you're very susceptible to poor air quality. But it's not like on the day-to-day, we're not telling people to wear a KN95 mask because we know that doesn't always go over well, to say the least.
But it won't hurt. So the question, yes.
Yeah.
If he feels the need to, absolutely.
But gotta make it a well-fitting N95. Yeah.
See downstream that noticeable, and similarly, were there other parallel improvements when there's like discounted public transport?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it. They did see ridership increase. It's one of those things I think that is really hard to measure because there's so much that goes into it that is outside of our control. So it's really hard to measure these individual interventions, how, like, exactly what impact are they having. So maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's-
To be clear as well, like our sensors, the ones that are schools at least, they measure ambient air quality. So it's not like, so it's only when it, like if it's passing or if it's right there in the region of the air monitor. So we're trying to fill in the gaps with some others, like those more high tech monitors. We're putting one at, I forgot to mention this, we're putting one at Denver Animal Protection. But actually did put one at Denver Animal Protection already. I don't think it's on our network yet, but it will be soon. So we're trying to fill in gaps in other places as well. That's why it's so important to work with our sister agencies or work with other community organizations to kind of do that as well. So we're trying to fill in those gaps to kind of figure those kinds of things out too. So that's a really good question.
Mhm. Yeah. Good question.
That's a great question. I think, well, Purple Arrow is, if I'm not mistaken, it's more like a company that like, they sell their products to other, we know places that use Purple Air, like there's a place in Connecticut in Hartford, Connecticut, that uses Purple Air to monitor their monitoring network. Place in Montana we talked to not too long ago, they use Purple Air for their sensors network as well. So ours is mostly like we use Lunar Outpost is what those lower cost sensors are. The other ones, the higher tech ones, are AQ Syncs. They're both local companies, by the way. But ours is mostly because it's like a community monitoring, I don't know how to explain how different it is, I guess. I guess ours is just city run. A lot of other places are like state run or things like that. I guess is how the difference is in a way. I hope I'm explaining that right.
The other thing, like compared to Purple River specifically, our data quality is a little higher. The sensors that we use are a little bit better than those. We also calibrate them against the state-run monitors. And so for each brand of sensors we use, we have one co-located. We set it up with the state monitor that we know is very reliable, very accurate, and we use that to run a calibration algorithm that corrects all of the other sensors in our network. They tend to run a little bit high, these low cost sensors. And so that kind of corrects for that. It's not as high quality as something like the state run monitors, but we are getting these kind of higher tech ones, those AQ syncs. Those actually have a couple of the pollutants they monitor at what's called the federal equivalent method. And so those have the potential to be just as high quality of data as the state. So that's new for us. We're bringing it on. We're working out how are we gonna achieve the right data quality and what data quality do we want to achieve, because you know the more work you put in, the better it is. But yeah, those are a couple ways it's different.
And in fact, on our Denver.air website, you can see the state reference monitors in our network as well. So we actually have them on our network too. It's an amazing question because yeah, you're right. Like teachers, administrators, whomever it's at schools, they're busy. There's a lot that they have to do. And a lot of them are very excited about doing something like this. At the same time, do they have the capacity? Right? Great question. And so, yes, there's like the teacher we had at Prep Academy, we paid her to help us with creating a project-based learning module for some DPS teachers. The teacher we have at Montbello, he actually just took it on. He didn't ask for anything. Not to say we didn't offer, but he didn't ask for anything. But he just took it on. He had a class he wanted to teach and use some data in, and it just fit with what he needed to do. But for the most part, yeah, we have the ability. In a sense, I can't speak to say we can pay all the teachers all the time, right? But we do have an ability to do something like that. So that's a great question, because you're right. The capacity is very limited for teachers and administrators. So
Another way that we can kind of do that with the group that Ephraim mentioned, the Greenhouse Connection Center, we're working on a grant application with them. It's called the EPA Community Change Grant from the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of money available for this kind of work right now. And so for this grant specifically, you have to have a partnership. So you have to have two organizations going in together on it. And so another way that we can build capacity is we've been spending a ton of time on working on applying for this grant for them. They're going to get all of the money for it. We're just kind of there as their partner and to provide, you know, the technical expertise, work together in more of these workshops like you mentioned. But that's another way we can do capacity building, because we always want to pay people to the extent we can, and then you have a certain budget. And so you also have to think about other ways that you can build capacity and get money for our partners that doesn't even directly come from us.
thanks for that question.
The other thing I'll say with our work with the clinics, we're doing that through a grant from Kaiser Permanente, and we actually wrote into the grant money for those clinic partners. So kind of the same thing. They're doing outreach for us. We need to be paying them for their time. So writing that into the grant ahead of time gave us the flexibility to be able to do that rather than thinking, oh, wait, maybe we should have done that, but now we don't have any money. So that was another key thing, I think.
And other things like translation services.
Yeah.
You guys all often do
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely. We learned a new term, actually, transcreate. So instead of translating, because we can do that easily, right? We're pretty much word for word. But transcreating, we heard this, we got this from a community member that came and spoke to us at a conference, which is much more nuanced. You take in you take into the account that the culture of what you're trying to translate, right? Not just the words, but the culture. So now we're having a whole new way of looking at it when it comes to translation services. Now we need to learn how to transcreate as well as translate our interpretation. So yeah, that's a great question, Sue. So yeah, we do, absolutely. We try our best to at least have everything else in Spanish, at least. We have a high number of Spanish speakers, native Spanish speakers in this city and county of Denver. So we try our best to make sure that that's what we do. We want to meet people where they are. And so that's important to us.
Any other questions? Great, well, let's thank our guests.
Thank y'all for having us. It's always fun to come out and talk to some students. We'll share the slides, and I have a couple of links in here if anybody wants to learn a little bit more.
Wonderful, yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
that's coming to you.
okay.
I don't have a question, but I have a little comment I put in the chat box.
Go ahead, yep.
Oh, I was just going to say back in the 1990s, I had a chance to work some with USGS and EPA on a program that EPA was starting then called MPACT, Environmental Monitoring for Public Access and Community Tracking. It was, they tried to encourage programs like this to get started. Near real-time dissemination of environmental monitoring data collected by local governments and community groups. And I just wanted to say it's so great to see how programs like this have grown and evolved into examples such as Love My Air. So I really appreciate the chance to learn more about it, and congratulations on all that you guys are doing in that wonderful program.
Thanks. Yeah, we can't do it without academics. We can't do it without community groups and our other sister agencies too. So thank you as well.
Great. Thanks so much. And yeah, I'll share the slides, contact information. Again, with all the guest speakers, it's great to reach out to folks. We've had students do practicum, capstone kinds of things with Love My Air. Again, because Nancy's an alum of the school, she understands that world real well. So yeah, encourage folks to reach out. Great offer also to access data.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just keeping an eye on your workshops and stuff like that. I've been able to go to a few. That's really, it's really great to see how you all are, trying to crack this nut of making sure people have the information they need to do, to take action, including the information about, not just how do I protect myself today, but also how do I engage in the process and try and, keep those pollutants trending downward where we can. So thanks again. Really appreciate both of you. And yeah, I've got a few housekeeping slides to go over, but you all are welcome to stick around or go about your day. So
Thank you guys.
yeah.
Before we leave, I'm gonna give a shout out also to Katie, because we see you all the time in these community spaces, and it's not always true for people in the academic sphere to get outside of campus. And so yeah, it's cool to be working with you guys as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I enjoy doing that for sure. Okay, so I just have a few notes for today. And actually I was gonna, because I don't have Lexi here. Lexi's off at the APHA conference, so we're missing her today. So I was gonna just take a quick attendance. Ella, thanks. Mackenzie, great. Megan, Olivia, Chandler, Heidi, Daniel, Johanna, don't see, Megan. Oh, there's two Megans. Am I missing Megans? Okay. Hi, Adriana. Eliza. I'm missing Carly. Hi. Tiasha. Jennifer. Marin. Arixa. Brian. Kristen. Miranda. Joey.
Brooke? Kendall? Chloe? Michaela? Marissa? Rhiannon? Sabrina? Sylvie? Courtney? Anna? Maria? I think I heard from Casey? Apshara? Liam? Becca? Madeline? Kate? Kieran? Okay, that's it. Great. Okay, quick housekeeping things. First of all, reminder that we're back here on Wednesday. Glenn will be coming down for the water pollution lecture. We are tracking some weather in the forecast, and Glenn's coming down from Steamboat. So far, he shared this morning, he seems confident that he'll be able to make it down, but we will try to let everyone know Tuesday night if we're needing to switch plans for any reason. And then also on Wednesday, we have an enrichment opportunity, a tour of the Edgar mine. So that information has gone out in the enrichment section, and I think also in the weekly email that Glenn sent out just ahead of class. Next week is asynchronous. We have the week 11 module is spatial data and GIS and natural resource extraction. Glenn, what's the status on that? We're posting today, right?
Yeah, it'll be open today.
Okay, great. And then the next time that we'll be live back in this classroom will be on November 13th for the first set of final presentations, which is exciting. So here's just a reminder of, and also a reminder to, if you haven't connected with your teaching team member and you need any support as you're getting plans in place, this is who your contact person is. Feel free to reach out to us. And then the schedule of who's presenting when. Hopefully this is not new information for anyone. You know when you're going. Okay, I wanted to just have, we've got 10 minutes or so. So if anyone has questions on the causal loop diagram assignment, so these instructions are all online. Here's one example of a causal loop diagram and some of the suggestions that we have. So again, as a reminder, the causal loop diagram assignment can be completed. You get to pick either a reading from Journal Club 1 or Journal Club 2. And then your assignment is to create a causal loop diagram that takes some aspect of what that reading was addressing. So for example, if you read All We Can Save and you want to focus on some aspect of climate change or radium girls, and you're looking at the radium exposures and health effects, right? So what you want to do is create a diagram that looks something like this. Some tips that we have in here. These also come from some of the guidelines that are in the assignment. So one of those is to use nouns for variable rate names. So instead of saying like increasing births or, you know, fall in birth rates, you have just the quantity births, okay? And then, because then you can have an arrow that shows how, okay, if birth per person increases, then that means the number of births is also going to increase, okay? And so we can use these little, and I think some of the guidelines show an O for opposite or R for reinforcing. The terminology is a little bit different as long as, so as long as you're using it consistently and even creating a little bit of a legend, I think the pluses and minuses are more intuitive. So as you're seeing here, okay, if if life expectancy, what this is showing, I'm not totally understanding all of the ins and outs of this particular diagram, but if life expectancy increases, then desired family size decreases. That's what this is showing. Okay. And again, I'm not totally sure why that is in this case. If desired family size goes up, then births per person is going to go up. And that's what that little plus means. So basically what the arrows mean is that there's a causal relationship between different variables. And then the plus minus means if one variable goes up, what happens to the other variable? So maybe a little bit more clear, if the population goes up, resources per person goes down. If there are more people, then there are fewer resources per person, okay? So those are kind of the key things. There are some ways that you can indicate if something is a reinforcing feedback. So that's that R. B, I also can't remember. Sorry, I should have looked into this particular diagram a little bit more. But basically, like, does this kind of more and more and more, or is it kind of going in that opposite direction? So, yeah, I think key things, obviously, you're not going to be able to capture absolutely every part of a system, right? But trying to have several different loops that are connected and showing what those connections mean, thinking about some intended consequences. So if we are, planting more trees, that will, increase the amount of or decrease the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay, but some trees actually create more volatile organic compounds, and so different air pollution might actually increase depending on the trees we plant. So looking at ways of showing for whatever system that you're illustrating, the things that we like, if we take this action and this goes up, the intended consequences to do this, but maybe there's another system that's also going to be affected. So it's really the key thing is to be thinking about these complex systems, how things interact with each other. And so, yeah, using these loops, this terminology, these sort of, arrows and plus and minuses. And then you'll record a short video where you can walk us through what you're trying to communicate with this diagram. Questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, should you try and have a combination of different types of loops, reinforcing, balancing? I don't think we have a requirement on that. I think, again, for your own thinking, it might be like if you can come up with an example of each type, right? That's kind of, it's a compelling story. But if that doesn't sort of fall out naturally in, like, not every system has both types. So I think don't force it if it doesn't seem, if there isn't something that is popping out at you. It's more having an understanding of what the systems look like and how those feedbacks are operating in that system.
I think the assignment does encourage the use of intersecting loops in the diagram.
Correct.
I believe there's some encouragement of that. Also in week 11, there's going to be an extra little mini lecture of 2 slides with a brief example and explanation of a causal loop diagram involving an example from water pollution. So you can
great.
Look forward to that in week 11.
Sounds good. And Glenn, do you have actually, you probably already all know the due date on this assignment?
On the calendar, it's November 1st. If we feel like we need to give a little more time, we can talk about that.
You have until Monday? Okay, let's extend the deadline till Monday.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, so that's what I think our intention is to put out that week 11 module today. Yeah. Okay, yeah, there are several examples in the assignment description already too. So. Other questions? Yeah, and feel free to, I will not have just a standing office hours this week since we have class on Wednesday, but my Calendly link is always a good place to go if you want to find a time to chat. All right, thanks all.